So they've solved the problems. They've fixed Standard. They've banned Uro, which is kind of what everyone expected anyway. There was a bit of a discussion around whether more things should have been banned. I even tweeted this morning asking how many things do you think would be banned? The majority of 2,640 votes thought 2 things would be banned. They're probably thinking, you know, Uro for definite, and then Omnath or Lotus, Cobra or Scute Mob. But no, it was just Omnath. And then, in the understatement of the year, Ian Dukas said, whilst Uro Titan of Nature's Wrath was a powerful and contentious card in the pre-rotation standard environment, yeah, you can say that again, we want to allow the metagame to adapt to the last set of standard changes and the imminent rotation before making decisions on whether to let it remain a part of the environment going forward. This week's events underscored that the 4-colour Omnath decks are dominating early play, and that even the decks built to try and beat those decks utilised the powerful Titan. And some of what they said there kind of echoed my initial statement, so I'm going to cover a few things that I talked about early on, after the early access event and just before the set released in the first week or so. I was saying, and I was mocking people for calling for bans on Lotus Cobra, because my argument was, surely we should give it some amount of time. Like, demanding bans immediately isn't very healthy for Magic. And don't forget, in times past, what would normally happen is a good deck would rise up, or some powerful cards would come out, and either the cards would just not be as good as people expected because something holds them down. Think how Jace the Mind Sculptor was unplayable in Standard, or borderline unplayable in Standard, whilst Bloodbraid Elf kept it in check, and then when Bloodbraid Elf rotated out, it became dominant enough to be banned. And also don't forget that people come up with counter strategies. One deck might be dominant until someone else realises that a certain archetype, if refined, is better against said deck. And I was saying on Twitter how maybe we can let the better players do this. And by better players, I don't mean myself, by the way. I'm not one of those better players. I'm talking about the professionals who solve formats. Eldrazi Winter is a good example of where people knew it was good, like Thought-Knot, Reality Smasher, and Ivugin, and the other one, Eldrazi Temple. But when LSV and everyone stomped the fucking Pro Tour with it, that was it. We knew what was going on. They refined it immediately. So I was wondering if professional players like your Menguchi's, your LSVs, and the people playing at the top tiers of Mythic and the big tournaments might be able to figure out a way to beat the Omnath deck. But it quickly became apparent when you had people like Brad Nelson tweeting about it that it's obviously an issue. And this issue isn't just a couple of cards have been printed that are dumb. Like, Uro was considered to be pretty fucking dumb pre-Zendikar Rising coming out. So there is a fundamental problem, a fundamental issue with how Magic is being designed and built as a game right now. And I'm not saying that I or other people could easily do better than the people designing Magic the Gathering. I've said this on multiple occasions on multiple platforms now, but I think designing Magic cards and balancing Magic the Gathering as a game, or any game of that complexity, the same applies to like Warhammer and stuff as well, they must be some of the hardest jobs in the world. Because not only are they a creative pursuit, which is not as easy as people think it is, but you have so many plates to spin, so many people to appeal to and satisfy, and then balancing games is a whole skill set that, again, I think people underestimate how hard that is. Doesn't change the fact that there's been a lot of fucking mistakes, though. I think people are very quick at the moment to either jump on Wizards and raggle them and ask people to step down and lose their jobs, which is fucking absurd. And on the other side as well, tell those people and others just to stop criticising. And why can't we have a middle ground where we are having that middle ground. There's just some vocal people who ruin both sides of this. But the middle ground where we talk about how there are problems, how we do criticise it, and hopefully things eventually get done. Now, it's obvious from the reaction on Twitter that people are not necessarily thinking this is enough. And not just on Twitter, across social media in general. Here we have John Roberts II saying, "Why do you fail us again, Wizards Magic?" in response to the ban announcement. Holy Diva says, "This has to be a fucking joke." Saffron Olive says, "My concern with today's banning is that I don't think the 4-color Omnath deck gets that much worse with Uro banned, whilst decks like Sultai Midrange probably won't exist anymore without Uro. It doesn't seem impossible that this just removes more non-Omnath decks from the format." A fair response. And Jim Davis has got a poll up at the moment saying, "Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath, goodbye. Is it enough?" Overwhelmingly at the moment, standing at around 700 votes at time of recording, 90%, 91, almost 92% think no. And if you start looking at Reddit, the comments are interesting as well. This one here, which has a score hidden because it's rocketed up so fast, I think, "That's it?" they ask. Meanwhile, multiple other people are saying, "We'll see you here next week or next month for the next band announcement." In many ways, this reminds me of two other circumstances we had recently. In the last year or so, we had Oko somehow dodge bans and then get banned about a month later when they finally admitted the problem. Mainly because they don't want to ban face cards from the new set, so exciting new cards. Even though they're not literal face cards, people can tell me how Uro wasn't a face card for Theros Beyond Death because it wasn't actually on the art of the boosters. But it was a face card in the sense that everyone associated with the set, and it was a chase mythic that people chased. And, well, yeah, it was a face card, all but in being literally on the face of the packet. So Oko dodged for a while because he was literally and figuratively and in every way possible a face of the set. He was the card they were using to preview this fucking set with Forbes and stuff. So he got exempted from being banned, but eventually got banned. And the other example that makes me think of is when they forgot to ban the cat that made the infinite combo, the copycat combo, and then banned it on like the following Monday. So Oko might have lasted a month. The cat was like an oversight, bit of backlash, banned it on the Monday. But the thing is, should they be banning things because of backlash? Really? Surely their figures and their numbers and the statistics they can get and the people that make this game should have some sort of grasp on where the game is going, and they should be able to make decisions without caring too much about media backlash. Part of me wonders if back in the day, if Corp Label would have been banned a lot quicker, if social media outrage factored into it. It also makes me wonder if certain things that never got banned, Lingering Souls, Unburial Rights, things that were considered very, very good to borderline oppressive, but then got pulled back down when people discovered ways to beat them, or answers were printed, Thundermoor Hellkite for Lingering Souls, for example, or Scavenging Ooze against Unburial Rights, if those things would have been banned much earlier if there was such a social media humdrum, not just on the source and the forums that existed back then, but on Reddit and Twitter and YouTube comments and so on. But also there's another element to that, the fact that we've got Arena and there's so many games being played all the time when it comes to Standard. Standard is their flagship go-to format, the one they want to push as esports. But they can't push it as esports if people are like actively leaving it, if the bump in viewership numbers aren't there on Twitch, if some of the biggest streamers like Crokies is saying that he doesn't really feel like streaming it right now. That goes to show there's problems, right? Or maybe the problems are just more apparent than they used to be because of how Standard interacts with the audience. And I guess as you grow into this new media or second wave of new media age, the second wave of the... And I guess as you grow as a company and you come into these second and third and fourth waves of social media and new media, you do have to adjust. So perhaps the argument that they do have to listen to the pulse, they do have to get in with the zeitgeist of Magic, and even if that is a vocal majority fucking complaining over nothing, in this case I'm not saying it's having nothing, the deck is obviously fucking insane. If you've played it with or against it, you can tell it's not healthy for Standard. But I'm just interested that it seems like the shouting is an important part of what gets things banned now. But all that said, and I'm just like throwing out ideas here, I'm just like off the cuff, turn my camera. I was playing some Mill featuring Uro in a modern video. It's obvious that Uro should never have been printed, but let's move on from that. The other point I guess I'm getting at is that perhaps the players do recognise and don't have the ulterior motive or the agenda to have these cards still sell packs. That's the real cynical takeaway from all this. People are saying the reason that Lotus, Cobra and Omnath, and to a lesser extent Scute Swarm, not Mob, Scute Swarm, can't be banned is because they're from the new set. And that not only is embarrassing to an extent, but it also harms consumer confidence and might mean that packs sell less and people aren't chasing the mythics and la-di-da-di-da. And that really brings me to the point that I do want to make. I've said a lot of like hypotheticals now, but the point I do want to make is that there needs to be a fundamental change in how they make, design, and print these Magic cards. Because if we're getting to the point where they can't ban stuff because it just makes them look like a fucking joke and damages their sales and damages the company and pisses off the shareholders and whatever metric they use to determine whether they're successful or not, in which case they need to print less cards that are this obnoxious. Like Omnath, honestly during preview season I don't think it made it into my preview video, but I looked at it and said, seems pretty good. I'm sure it'll see play, but I never registered that it was fucking absurd, right? But people aren't missing these things at spoiler season. I've done this before and talked about Oko. I came in with my Oko video, which you can click for in the cards, saying that I was going to, say to people, we missed this stuff. They can miss this stuff. But when you look back at the spoiler threads for Oko and stuff, Oko was an obvious one that people did not miss. However, people do miss some stuff. Strictly Better MTG has been doing some great Twitter threads where he goes back through the Reddit threads and shows off some of the really outlandishly, now with hindsight, dumb takes on powerful powerhouses from Standard. So it goes to show that people do get things right and wrong. But some of these things like Oko are obviously dumb. Uro had that feel too. Omnath, not so much. I again thought it was good, but thought it was a commander card that might end up seeing a bit of play. But it turns out that having 4 coloured pips in your mana cost isn't much of a restrictive thing. We saw this with Chain Whirler. Chain Whirler and its ilk and that whole cycle were meant to be difficult to cast, but Chain Whirler ended up being an easy include in mono red. Now we're seeing, thanks to triomes and the pathways, and of course even the weakened fetch lands like Fable Passage and Evolving Wilds that are currently standard, that casting Omnaths, which cost 4 out of the 5 colours of Magic, isn't that hard. I think we need to get away from this idea that that can be a restrictive way of balancing your card. That's the theory, right? If you make them a gold card and harder to cast, they can be pushed in power level. And we see this all the time with Teferis and Okos and Uros and this, especially in the blue-green camp. So, what I'm trying to say is, they need to peel back the power level of these standard cards. This is something I might go into a bit more in detail when I've written up some very clear examples I can go into. But it's things like Twitter user Reaple Cheap put up this grid. And that's just courtesy of Drizoth, apparently. But I retweeted this because it showed that the number of cards making their way into Legacy from modern formats. And if you look at 2019 there, 2019 is bombarding Legacy with cards, where other years hardly scratched the surface. 1993 being the big one. Everything else failing by comparison to 2019. Even if you're not great with grid analysis, you can see that number, that grid line, going up towards the bigger numbers. And all this does is just go to prove, well, there's two things. One thing manipulates that number. One thing is that Modern Horizons was a thing. They'd never really put it directly into Legacy and Modern and Skip Standard before. That did push the power level a bit. But it just goes to show as well, when you've got Thassa's Oracles and Underworld Breaches and all this other stuff, all the Planeswalkers from War of the Spark and Thrones. You've got Oko, and you've got Teferi, and you've got Khan and Narset, and to a lesser extent Ashok as well. That the power level is being pushed really hard to, I guess, make Magic exciting. Like, seeing someone make a ton of Scoop mobs on Arena is exciting, but I guess you've got to have those exciting things and you've got to have the tools to deal with them. And Standard doesn't have that, and Modern for the longest time had problems of not having that as well. I have shouted from the rooftops about how things like Force of Will, or Rishadan Port, or Wasteland, or to a lesser extent Hymn to Turok, and other things that you don't get in Modern that you do get in Legacy that helps Legacy remain kind of balanced, might be good for Modern, especially as we can't reprint the Reserve List card, so it makes Modern into mini Legacy. It might destroy its identity, but it gives us a way of fighting back against the oppressively powerful threats that they keep printing. And that's the thing, the power creep tends to be in the end game, or the threat. We don't tend to see power crept answers as much. We've seen Fatal Push, and we've recently seen Black get the ability to destroy enchantments, for example. So that's a little bit of power creep. There are cards that do that. Push itself kind of became the Bolt of Modern in many ways. Like, does the card die to push or not? Is more of a question, does it die to Bolt? Cool, I get that, but that's a rarity. We rarely ever see improvements, refinements, or just power crept versions of the answers. It's always the threats. It's always the big bodies that come down, draw you a card, gain you life, make you full mana, and then shoot your opponent. That sounds like a really big exaggeration, but if you haven't read Omnath, that's what Omnath does. Sure, it's fun to slam powerful cards. Sure, it makes for a better spectator sport when the cards make incremental, or insurmountable, should I say, advantages for the person playing them. But surely there should be comeback moments as well, right? Like, Chain Whirler might even be pretty good right now because it deal with a Scoop Bomb Menace, for example. I guess there's arguments that Oko was one of those things. He was not just a threat, but he was an answer, but he was everything. He was a Planeswalker that was threats and answers all combined into one. We need better Fatal Pushes, we need better Heroes Downfalls, or just those cards in general being in Standard more often, right? We need even just a straight up Doomblade probably isn't enough, come to think of it. They've got Heartless Act and stuff like that. We need better ways to solve the problems that they're throwing at you. They're asking all these questions with these powerful cards, and you never have the answers available to you because the answers are never power crept to the extent. Every single threat they throw at you, or you get to throw at your opponent thanks to Wizard of the Coast, tends to have draw a card in it now, right? Why the fuck does Uro draw a card when he comes in now, and then draw a card when you play him later as well, and he gains you life, and he's a 6/6? It's like when you start marrying up all these things, that you're never even down a resource. Like, at least with Elder Gargoyle, that started to see a bit of play before Omnath arrived. At least this thing has some counterplay. You can kill it before it starts being an engine that draws you cards and makes you bodies. And Planeswalkers don't tend to allow you to do that because they make immediate value for what they do. And most creatures, most of the pushed ones do as well. So yeah, that's where I'm at. The Uro thing feels like old bannings, where they've had to emergency ban immediately afterwards. And I think the only way to fix this now, A, they need to ban some more stuff right away, which we'll see anyway. We'll see some more bannings. But B, is to avoid this and damaging the integrity of the product in future is either to peel it back on the threats you're printing or print better answers. At least that's where I'm at the moment. Don't forget, I can change my opinion much like many other people can. I'm always open to discussing and hearing people say stuff on Twitter and on Reddit and in the comment section of these videos. I hope you've enjoyed this rambling, open thought idea about Uro, because it just happened and I was excited to talk about it because Magic's kind of exciting again. And there is that. You might be bored of Standard, but I even love playing Modern today. So Magic's kind of exciting again. If you liked the video, hit the like button down below. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Was Uro enough? And are you sick of the power creep? Do you want it to be powered down? Or do you think it's better answers that way? Is that the way we're going? Is Yu-Gi-Oh! Power creep like that? I don't know. Let me know in the comment section below. Hit that like button. And in the meantime, be good to one another. Be nice to one another. And yeah, observe your COVID guidelines or whatever. I don't fucking know. Ta-ta for now.